Now let us talk about different areas of the user interface. Now we've already talked about the command manager. We know that we can modify the different sizes of the icons, we can move it around, we can do loads of different things. Let's talk about our feature tree and different ways that we can clean up our feature tree. The first thing I want to show you is expanding the display pane. Now we used this briefly when we started talking about the user interface, but I just want to make note that by default, it's going to be minimized. So make sure that you expand it, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to do several things during the series. Now, of course, on the screen, you'll see me expand it and hide it several different times, but for the most part, it's a good idea to leave it expanded just to remind yourself that it's there when you're starting to learn SolidWorks. Let's talk a little bit about what we can do to clean up our feature tree. So right now, what we have are folders that are located at the top of our file. Now, if we right click, we go to Hidden Tree Items, you'll notice that we have several different items that are hidden. Now, if we go to Hide Show Tree Items, there are lots of different things that we can show and hide. Now, depending on which version of SolidWorks you're using, obviously this is 2016, it has more options than it did in the past few years. So we're going to take a look at the different things that we can hide and show. First, let's talk about the options at the top. We have Scroll Selected Item into View. This is a very handy option when you select something on the screen and you want to find it in your feature tree, especially when you have a very large feature tree or you're working in a big assembly. When you create a new feature, it'll automatically select the name so you can type in a new name for that feature, or simply hit enter and create the default name. We'll show that in just a little bit so you can understand what that feature does. Arrow key navigation will allow you to use the arrows to move the feature tree up and down. I typically leave this off because I use a 3D mouse, and if I simply hover the cursor over there, the 3D mouse will let me scroll up and down as well. Dynamic highlight is a very handy option because it allows you to highlight things in the feature tree by selecting them inside of the modeling environment. Then we have some other options. Use Transparent Flyout Feature Manager. Again, very handy option. If you have something going on inside of the properties, it'll automatically create a flyout window of the feature tree. You notice that Enable Feature Tree Manager Tree Filter is on, and we'll show that in just a second. And there's also another option, Enable Component Renaming. Now let's talk about the folders. Several different folders in here, and by default, a lot of them are set to automatic. I like to use the design binder, so I'm going to go ahead and show that. And you also notice that I've hidden annotations, I've set blocks to automatic, and by default, I'm showing solid bodies and surface bodies folders. It's a good idea to leave a lot of these automatic or hidden if you're not going to use them. For instance, e-drawing markups, I'm going to leave that as automatic, selection sets as automatic, and so on. The ones that you really want to focus on showing is make sure that you show materials, show default planes, and show origin. These are going to be very handy for us later on in the series. So you notice that now in my tree I have design binder, surface bodies, solid bodies, and then I have materials in my default planes and origin. If I expand design binder, you notice that there's a design journal in here. If we double click this, it's going to open a Word document. If I bring this into my screen, you notice that it starts with a screen capture of your item, and it starts a journal in here. It tells you the file name, you can add a description if there's not already one saved in the file, and it'll also display the material if you've selected a material. This is a great way for you to make notes throughout the modeling process. But I should note that you don't necessarily have to be limited to a Word document. You can attach other documents such as an Excel file directly into your design binder. It's a great way to pass these files along when you save it and you pass it on to another user. I often use it for things like part numbers for items I may consider using or things that I want to research or different ideas I might have. So it's a great way to pass that information along. Other things that we can do to help customize this are change the size of this, we can move it in and out, or we can completely hide it. Now it's a good idea to hide it when we're trying to do things like set up a scene and maybe center our part in the modeling window. Then we can bring it back and we can know that our model is currently centered. I showed this early on, but we can drag this down and we can have two feature trees here. Very handy if you want to do things like show the configurations window or always keep a property tab open. If you simply drag it back to the top, it's going to leave you with just one design manager. Now let's talk a little bit about the task pane. Now the task pane by default is on the right-hand side of the window, but we can drag this out by grabbing the top and pulling it out into the modeling window. Now this is a great resource because you can drag it onto another window and have it docked there so it's out of your modeling window. Or we can bring it back to the right-hand side. If you decide that you don't want to use that, we can simply right-click and you can turn off the task pane. So that way it's completely hidden, but you can always bring it back by select task pane. Another thing that we can do is we can turn off the heads-up view manager. This is an extremely handy tool, and I recommend that you leave it on. But a lot of new users find it cumbersome if for some reason your model is behind here and you're trying to select something and it's obscured behind something. So for now, we can right-click, we can go to the view heads-up, and we can turn it off. So just note that you have the option to customize that.